Bryan, welcome to the Democratizing SEO podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for accepting to be on. I came across your podcast episode with Shelley Walsh, and I found it fascinating, especially when you talked about the beyond online signals part. And I thought this has to be an episode on its own because non-online signals are something that I've been considering for quite some time now, and I know a number of SEOs have been thinking about it. So it's just apt that you are decided to be on. I want to ask to start with, when did you first come across the idea or consider that Google may or may not be using non-online signals for their search results?
I think it's about a decade now, almost exactly. I think I presented something at SCS, Search Engine Strategies. I presented a keynote called Mad Men of Search. And I was just kind of going through what the generations were, trying to, update people on where, big data was headed. And we were working with a client back then, and something struck me, and we realized, okay, they can't be just using online signals. And I could tell you exactly the type of client. They were, the client sold educational toys, okay? And they worked really hard at their SEO, and they were climbing, they were doing some great stuff. I was helping them with their conversion rates and all that. But there was one site that was terrible, like, flash based, no content, really just purely about the brand, didn't even have that many links. And it always ranked number one. And it was obvious why to me, but it didn't make sense from what everyone was talking about from an algorithm point of view. And it was Fisher Price, which is the number one's world's leader in kids' educational toys, right? I mean, I bought Fisher Price toys when I was a little kid. My kids had the Fisher Price toys. Like, it's a big brand. And so you got to say, okay, if it's not obviously the website, because there was nothing there to rank for, if it wasn't the link profile, could it be advertising? Maybe, but they don't even advertise, because mostly, it came through their partners like the Toys R Us and the KB Toys and all the other toy stores. And we're like, okay, there's got to be another signal. And it can't be that me as a general human know Fisher Price is the dominant brand in the category, and that Google doesn't know it, right? Eric Schmidt always said that the job of Google was to replicate the real world. And there are plenty of databases out there that will tell you who is buying what. We have all the credit card transactions. Like, there's just so much. And I think at that point I realized, they're playing 3D chess and we're just trying to play checkers, most SEOs.
Google's objective is to organize the world's information. The world's information, not online information, the world's information. Is this a clue that SEOs perhaps have overlooked over the decades now?
Yeah, obviously there are some, correlations of stuff that you can do online to make it easier for Google to find you, to understand your content, to understand that, that you're providing something of importance. And I guess it also matters in the category you're in, right? If you're in a brand new software category, like when we first started talking about conversion optimization in the mid 90s, there was no one talking about it. So it's relatively easy to rank for conversion rate optimization because nobody else was writing about it, talking about it, speaking about it, publishing about it. It just didn't happen. So when Google had to say, okay, well, oh yeah, there's this one company that provides currency conversion rates, but if you're meaning the other conversion rate, well, we got you here with the Eisenbergs and Future Now and our newsletter grok.com in the day. And so I think when we look at those signals, they're valid signals. It's not like they're not using them. But when you look at even back then, right, I think it was, I don't want to give you the exact numbers, it was said that Google's big table related to personalized search, okay, again, this is going back a decade, 93 columns compared to only 18 columns related to the website crawling information. So 5 times the information about the end user versus the content or the website.
Wow. I have to get straight onto the meat of this question, Bryan. What are these signals?
They're just massive databases on top of what, Google collects. This one's interesting for me because, I also recently started a local home services businesses with my wife, right? And we're in the senior care industry. We don't drive a lot of foot traffic to our office, so they can't count on that. But you got to realize that, if I'm in the hamburger business, okay, and I want to sell hamburgers all day long, it's not hard for Google to figure out who has people waiting in line for hamburgers. Where are people navigating all day long for hamburgers? They've got all that map data. Do you think your one link is going to trick them to think, oh, no, that's not where people are buying hamburgers? And so I think, we have to start reframing this and saying, okay, if Google's job and their only way to exist is to continue to be relevant, okay, what are their data collection systems that are out there, okay, that they can collect information or procure information through partners, whether that's paid or shared, satellites, right? I mean, like the cars driving around, like all the things that they do to collect data is all in their database. And what is that telling them? What signals is that giving them over whatever signal you can use by changing your link, text? Like it's just not gonna make a difference.
Yeah. I think SEOs, we've very much focused on the web index, and that was fine maybe a decade, 2 or 25 years ago, right? But now they have other indexes that are far more superior. Maps index, for example, is way more important to Google than the web index. It almost to me seems as though the web index, when you compare it from a macro point of view, comparing Google with other big tech companies, the web index in some instances is actually out of date. It's quite old compared to the way these other big brands, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, they all use a more up-to-date approach for databases.
100%. And I think that's why, like, one of the recent signals I've seen Google do on their local, right, is they've started saying, okay, in your Google Maps profile, why don't you add in the links to your social so we can start seeing what's happening there as well? Because if you're being talked about in social, even though you're not very popular as a physical location, people don't drive to you, I can get a sense of who you are. I can see the kinds of interactions that you're having with the content you're putting out. Like, that tells me things about who your audience is, how big your audience is, how big it is compared to others in similar category. And don't forget the number one most significant signal they have that nobody talks about. And they can claim all day long they don't use it, but I'm not buying it. Again, how's it used? And I think that's the important question. But how many people are using some form of Gmail address? How many emails are going through their servers? Every order confirmation that ever goes out there, every purchase that goes on with the Google Pay, like all of those are additional big data signals about what people are actually buying, where people are actually setting up appointments at. That's a signal.
There was a time in search history where everything just seemed to take a massive swing. And this was around a time when personalization became a thing within search. And it just so happens to be when social media was on the rise. And I will need to go back and check, but I believe that was the point where Mark Zuckerberg had this, he had a sort of like an interview where he talked about one identity across the web. And I also look at that as a marking point of where things started to take a huge change. In the SERPs, are everything personalized now?
For the most part, yeah. Obviously there are unique searches, but they're still going to present you the results based on where you are, what you're browsing in, what your previous browsing history has been, whether you're male, whether you're female, whether you're married, whether you're a high income earner, whether you're not. Like it's gonna change. There's no reason if I almost never go out to eat fast food for them to present me a ton of fast food options. It's not good for their model. It's not good for their business. It's not good for their advertisers. Now, to throw one in here and there, absolutely. But it just doesn't make sense from their perspective to do this. And now we're also getting to the age where, Google doesn't need you to create all that content because it can take all those signals and use SGE and start generating their own content that's as good or better than most content out there.
So each day, from a content point of view, there are billions of searches, probably even more now, trillions of searches. A huge chunk of that are searches that Google are unfamiliar with. Which types of searches would you say they're unfamiliar with? Are they more, well, you've just indicated that they're content, generic content, but nowadays it seems to be Google and all of these big brands, they're focusing more on people, entities. Specifically, personal branding is a big part of, I would say, what they're aiming to target and to understand, to figure out. And I was reading this DIKW model, not model, sorry, pyramid. So data, let me see, data, information, knowledge, wisdom. And I'm curious, is this a case of we're now at a point where all of that is centered around people? The same way social media focuses on people, we see this with search as well.
So at the end of the day, people have always bought from people, right? And this is the premise of everything we've done in marketing, right? This is just storytelling, right? From the age of cavemen, when people stood around the fire and told stories, the storyteller was always the most powerful person, right? It conveys the information in the best form possible. It knew, hey, don't go into that field over there because you might get eaten by the lion. But if you go that way, you're probably safe. And I think, again, this is just human nature, right? And this is why we're seeing a big emphasis, like you said, on the personal brand, on people within the companies standing out, not just generic brands, because brands change. They are fickle. We can see what they're doing in the market as well. There's an aspect to that, but the people and the credibility that they have, they develop followings, and I think that's an important aspect of this. And Google understands that social graph is very possible. Now, they've never been able to replicate their own real great social graph, even though they actually do have one. Do you know what their social graph is?
No, I don't.
Your Gmail contacts.
Oh, wow. Of course. Of course.
They know who you email. They know how frequently. They know like they know the social graph. They don't need it all exposed, and they don't need you posting content. They know the hubs and spokes of where all of this happens.
Huh. Wow. So would you say then it's more important for search, in fact, all of these big brands, big tech, to focus more on people and then the content that they create, or focus on, what I'm trying to get at is information now centered around people as the source of information, or is it, let's organize the world's information by topic, or is it people first?
I think we're thinking about it not in a clear way. what does brand Coca-Cola look like to you, sound like to you? Even though we all know Coke, right? We know the brand. What does it look like and sound like to you?
I'm thinking,
Kind of vague. I mean, we could think the red color, right?
yeah,
The little
I had red in mind.
right, but that's about it. It doesn't really have a character, right? So when back in the day, I'm going to date myself here, way before I had any grades, before we even talked about SEO. I remember the commercial with Mean Joe Green, the football player, and at the end of the football game, they had a big commercial, and everyone should buy each other Coke, and they had some great messaging, and that was all there was. Today, you just need to watch what gets people's attention, because at the end of the day, this is about capturing attention, okay? Whether this is for commercial purposes, entertainment purposes, or edutainment, as I like to call it, what is capturing people's attention today? And 90% of the content that's doing that is just what we're seeing in front of us, right? That person talking face to face, right into the camera, right at you, right? We look at what's engaging in TikTok. It's that one person doing that storytelling, sharing this stuff. Like, that's impactful, and it's not by accident that that's capturing most people's attention. So again, we need to come back and rethink that all Google's trying to do is they're in the advertising game. The advertising game is a game of attention. So what can they do to capitalize on that attention? And when you're one step ahead of understanding where they're headed and what they're trying to accomplish, you realize that the number one thing I need to focus on is really being obviously relevant, entertaining, engaging, timely for my audience. That's it.
When you think back to 20, 25 years ago when Google first started, the vision you had for where Google was headed, does it match the reality we're in right now?
Oh, no. The concept of big data back then didn't really exist, right? We really didn't understand how far this graph would essentially go, right? They went from what was essentially, a few authoritative websites, these directories that were telling people these are the things that were on there, and they were trying to just raw index, content that, people were creating in web position gold, right? To, as I explained in that presentation, which again, you and I kind of chuckled about it. Right after that presentation, I uploaded it to SlideShare, and every slide on there has somehow been vanished. Like, you can click through it, but there's nothing there. They won't show the images, which I found fascinating.
Totally blank.
Yeah, totally blank. You can look it up, Man of Search, Bryan Eisenberg, SlideShare. You'll find it. It's just like, I never touched it. I never changed it. Something all of a sudden they decided that didn't need to be out there, and I'm not sure what. But I watched Google evolve step by step, and where it became really interesting to understand their direction was their sandbox, which was AdWords, right? Because the search engine followed behind what they did with AdWords. Okay. So in the early days of AdWords, it was, okay, who could bid the most for spots was the one who showed up. Like, that was it, right? It was very, very simple algorithm. They then started introducing the concept of quality scores, right? That was in 2005, right? It's almost 20 years ago. And so now that started getting to take a look at not only just how much you were bidding, but who was actually getting clicks. So were these ads that they were putting on actually relevant? So if that started becoming important to them, they started realizing, okay, well, maybe the clicks actually matter in our search results. So we should also probably see how that plays on, if I'm giving 10 blue links and 3 of them are never getting clicked on, they should go towards the bottom. The ones that are getting clicked on should move up. Seems pretty obvious to me in hindsight. Then they started looking at more than just the clicks on the ads. They started saying, okay, well, what happens to the activity once they get through? Do they come back? Is there a pogo sticking event? This is part of the early UX language. Were they clicking and bouncing back to the search results looking for something else, or were they actually sticking and buying something? And then you got to the point where they had a lot more information about what was actually happening once you click through, right? Because they owned Android, right? So they can see all that behavior, all that data is coming through. They had the Chrome browser, right? And so that was what early on, like 30-40% of the market. It grew very, very quickly, right? It destroyed Microsoft Explorer. And then, of course, you had Google Analytics, okay, which they acquired from Urchin and all of that. And between that and the AdWords cookies, there was a point probably about, maybe even about 12 years ago, where they had information on probably 2/3 of the web. That's a lot to draw conclusions from, right? And then you start looking at the world when they first introduced universal analytics. So, hey, upload me your sales data, upload me this, upload me that, and start getting all that greater information there. Upload the call center data to us, share with us those leads. And now you realize how much more information you can actually gather. And it's mind-blowing where they might have actually accomplished in the last 10 years since I published this.
Why do you believe the pages on your Mad Men or Search deck on SlideShare are blank?
Let's just say that for a lot of years, there's been a lot of people claiming that they don't use third-party data and they don't do these things. And it just lets you kind of draw the obvious conclusions that there's no possible way what we're seeing makes sense without them actually having that third-party data in place.
If Google uses
and now,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and now they don't even possibly need all that third-party data with everything else that they have, right? They, like I said, emails, contacts, everything you're doing with Google Maps, where you're going, all your Chrome, like they have so much information. Okay, if you've ever seen any one of those movies or television shows about the NSA spying on you, they've got nothing on Google. I better watch out. It may have a rocket coming at me soon. I don't know.
Why do you think they keep this information either hidden or secretive?
Oh, it would spook most people if they actually knew how little privacy there actually is in the world. No matter what you have your private settings and all that. They look, here's a very simple example. You can test this out, okay? And I've had a number of SEOs play with this. If you want to go ahead and you want to claim a local business, okay? And you're in what city right now?
I'm in UK, London.
You're in London proper. Okay, great. If you're in London and you try to claim a local address for a business here in Austin, Texas, is it guaranteed, even if you fill out all the stuff, that you're going to get verified right away? And the answer is no. Why? Because Google has a mapping of every pretty much IP address out there to the exact block level. And so if it looks at you and says, oh, you're verifying it from London, I'm going to need some additional information that this is really your business. And if you don't think that's part of their bigger data set, again, maybe you got stuck in 1998.
When SEOs use VPN, so I'm in London. If I want to use a VPN to see search results in Texas, do you then think that is not quote unquote true VPN?
It is, but do you think Google doesn't know the list of IP addresses of all the VPNs out there? Right? It may not know exactly where you're tunneling in from, but it knows it's a VPN. right? And so it's going to look at that data in a different way than a non-VPN.
When SEOs look into rankings then, and rankings is an interesting topic for me because yes, I consider it, but I like to recommend to businesses to focus more on pages rather than rankings, right? And when you think of the way we focus on rankings, is it out of date, the specific focus on keywords? Or should we continue the traditional practice of it?
It's a great question. So what are keywords? Okay. Now, some keywords make a lot of sense because they are natural expressions of the way you and I think of things. Okay. And so it is about user intent. And so oftentimes we will use that language of that keyword when we go out for our searches. Okay. But it's an outdated model for a couple of reasons. Obviously, there is some value to it. But where are we spending more time today? In search or on things like TikTok and Reels and all of that, where we're starting to see attention graphs matter a lot more than keywords. Now, are there hashtags there? Yeah, because that's how they can sell some advertising and stuff like that. But the algorithm understands the attention graph. And that's really what we need to capture if we want to have success. If keywords are part of that strategy, sure. Right? I always like to say this. There's a quote from my mentor: talk to the dog in the language of the dog about what matters to the heart of the dog. Keywords are a subset of what matters to our customers. It's not the whole thing.
Mm. TikTok quite relatively recently opened up their shop page, or not page. I'm sorry, that's my SEO brain on their shop function on their site. And it's clear that they're going after the search space. What are your thoughts on TikTok being a legit threat to Google search?
Let's just say Google search has more than one place where they've got competition happening, right? We're seeing it everything from, ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot to TikTok. Again, this is a battle for attention. When we wanted entertainment, when we wanted information, we'd go to Google. Today, it comes at us and it keeps us sucked in for hours as opposed to us chasing it down. Many people probably don't remember the early days of the web. I mean, I'm talking about, mid 90s, where there were only hundreds and thousands of pages to look at. And you literally just, click around until you found one of your favorite sites. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a new link. Let me go check out that new site. That was like your joy for a week because you found a new website. That behavior is long gone, right? We expect things to be pushed at us. There is more that can be done, and I think Google still hasn't figured out, based on calendar and location and my social graph, right? My contacts and my time of day and what I have been searching for and where I've been going, to bring way more personalized content at me. I just don't think Google has that leadership to think in that way anymore, but doesn't mean that they're obviously not leveraging a lot of those signals because they're out there and they're important.
If Google doesn't have that leadership, if they're, let's say, number 2 or 3, who is number 1?
I still think that when you look at this, you absolutely have to consider, obviously, some of what we're seeing with ChatGPT and OpenAI and what we saw there and where that's all headed. I think Microsoft is playing some very serious games, right? They're playing the long game. They've been around a really long time. They understand the cycles that go on and on. I think they're a very, very serious player. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Amazon, having written the book Be Like Amazon. I think without Jeff Bezos' leadership, they've lost a little bit of that edge. I think they had way more competitive advantages. They could have dominated local if they had chosen, because they could have easily, besides having their shopping index, had a local index as well. So anywhere I want to say, my son wears a size 16 wide and 16 extra wide running shoe. Not easy to find, only online. But imagine being able to go into my Google Maps and say, okay, where can I find locally this? And it basically had two different indexes, right? The web store index and the local index. And they could show me both and say, oh, you want to go try it on? Here's a place. And you can pay with Amazon Pay and be gone. COVID definitely slowed down a lot of things, but it opened up a lot of new doors. And so I think we're going to see some very interesting things. And it's going to take these next 3 to 5 years where you're going to see a lot of disruption happen.
If SEOs were to, let's say, study Amazon's search functionality, what other interesting insights do you reckon they'll uncover from it?
Well, so keep in mind that the best part about what Amazon has is not what's on the site. It's obviously all their map data that they're doing, because that last mile is the critical piece to all this, and they have figured out how to solve that better than any other retail out there. So I don't know if you'd figure that out. Like I said, I think their leadership has slowed down. I think they've let a lot of bad experiences, bad players onto the platform, and they need to fix all of that up. But same thing, right? They know the transaction data. They're going to show you what sells. If you want to find the obscure thing, you're going to find it. But trust me that they are keeping track of anything that trends on things like TikTok, and they have ways to act on it almost immediately.
E-commerce
and you sort of need to learn how to do the same thing.
E-commerce is an interesting space for SEO, because we have all of these big tech companies going after this space, and it's going to be interesting to see how the next 3 to 5 years play out, because already I don't think Google are number one with e-commerce. I think they are competitors of Amazon with e-commerce, and I think TikTok is a huge problem for them, just from an e-commerce point of view alone. So it's going to be
so TikTok.
Go ahead.
Yeah, TikTok has the challenge of, especially because they don't have a good reputation in terms of the quality and stuff like that. So they're going to have to battle that a lot, because, and this is why I'm telling you, like, if you watch something start trending on TikTok and you go to Google and start typing the first couple letters, you're going to see it on Amazon. You're going to see it come up right away, some similar products, because they're well aware of it. And it's kind of like the same example I used many, many years ago in a presentation. The day Michael Jackson passed away, okay, Amazon reconfigured their whole MP3 store in under 2 hours. And the only reason it took 2 hours was because there's a quality control delay between when they push something live and it gets approved across the globe. And so literally they had content ready in case anything ever happened to him, and God knows how many other people they have ready for, that they can flip the switch and have it ready for such a tragedy. Do you think any other store was ready? Do you think Google was ready for that? Nope. Because they have a separate news index, and they have a separate search index, and a separate shopping index, and it's not unified. And when you get to be that agile and understand how to live in this real-time world and how to market in this real-time world, because that's about people's attention again, we're always going to come back to that, you are going to be the leader.
Attention graphs is an interesting phrase that you've just brought up, and that I'm going to explore even more. And already I'm wondering, are Google, or in fact all of these big tech companies, they all have algorithms, they all have search functionalities, right? And they're competing with each other. Are they competing to serve us users, or are we a delivery system for something that they are planning, which we don't yet see?
It's a great question. I had the privilege, after sharing one of my presentations at SES, I don't believe it was this one, I believe it was another one, that I had at that point the head of the quality score team for Microsoft reach out to me and asked me to come speak to his team about relevance and explain it to the way I did. It definitely wasn't this presentation. I know which presentation it was now. And their job, right, what they're tasked to do is truly understand what is relevant to people, what it gets people's attention. And they're just trying to use algorithms to match that. Because at the end of the day, if you don't serve the user, you don't have a business, right? So their job is to cater to us. The problem is how effectively they can do that and who else is competing for people's time, right? There's a reason that, things like Apple now will start sharing with you your screen time and showing you where you're spending all your attention. There's value in that.
Mm-hmm. If we think about let's put the web index in and traditional SEO signals aside. If a business wanted to acquire an audience from these big tech, because we're all acquiring their users, right? What marketing approaches would you say work today and will always work? Let's say as a truism practice from an organic point of view. So paid search aside.
High value, entertaining content. Just what it is.
What search signals should SEOs really drop as a practice?
Are
there any you still see
today? It's an interesting question. I would say quantity of links is definitely one of them. I think, the number one thing we're looking for is user engagement, right? Are people sticking around? Are they clicking through your website? Are they interested in everything that you have to offer? So if you're a fashion brand, how many of your items are they actually looking through, right? If they get to your website, they look at the one item that they were searching for and they bounce and they never come back, Google's likely never going to show it to you again. But if you go there and, you browsed 15, 20, 30 pages, they know that you had interest in that company's stuff. Now, will it get your attention again? That's a different story. But they have a high likelihood that they'd want to show you that because they knew that obviously you spent time there and they satisfied your search. And so I think we have to just reframe the way we approach this. And this is what, we've been saying for forever and ever, right? Is you have to focus in on the end user optimization, not optimizing for the search engine. Search engines don't carry credit cards.
I've been saying that for years, Bryan. We're acquiring users via search engines. We're not optimizing for search engines. It might sound like a play on words, but I think it's an important way of phrasing how we market from an organic point of view. Now, you're in the States, right? Do you have SGE released where you are? And have you played with it if you do?
I've played a little bit with it. Right now, my attention's focused in a couple of different areas. I'm actually spending a lot more time thinking about local home service businesses, plumbers and electricians, and the data they collect, and how to help them grow their businesses, as well as the business my wife is in. And so I'm spending a lot more time there. And it's interesting, I spend a lot less time on Google than I ever have before.
Wow.
Which is fascinating, right? I'm spending a lot more time in communities that are having relevant discussions about the topics that matter to my audience, and it's giving me time to learn, because I can't search that out because I'm not from that community. So they're new communities for me, and so at the end of the day, what a business needs to focus on is building their community, and that wherever that community may exist, and how can you provide value to them? How can you get their attention?
With the rise of AI chatbots, I've been pondering let's say the next 5 to 10 years quite often. And I see a world where communities are built, and online communities, and people search on platforms that they are familiar with. So if I'm on TikTok, I would want to do my searches on TikTok, on Amazon. And I believe this will spread across businesses, industries first, and verticals, and then businesses. Do you then see a world where search is dispensed even broader from where it is now, where Google has by far the most market share globally?
Look, I think we're living in a time where we see search as being disrupted. Will search ever go completely away? No, but how we use search will drastically change. I also believe that a big part of what we're seeing is right now we're starting to see some of these, AI bots that people are using for businesses. I believe all of us will have our own personal Jarvis, right? We'll all have our own AI bot who monitors our own personal data, keeps it behind a firewall, but it knows us. And as we need things, it will feed us what we need to know. So if you just finished a heavy workout, right, and it's detecting, you're getting dehydrated, right, my device is going to let me know, hey, three blocks off to the left, there's a place where you can get, bottle of water, whatever it is, right? That is the direction where it needs to go to, where we all have our own individual Googles, essentially, our own individual AI bots that know us, know our preferences, know all the data that we're generating around our lives. You're in the middle of working on a PowerPoint, and it's going to tell you, hey, you need to take a break because your eyes are starting to get strained, and it can detect. Like, that's where we're headed, right? It's not going to be us actively seeking things. It's going to be more of that information that we're generating around us, driving our own intelligent bots to bring us what we need at that moment.
And it's fascinating, the DIKW pyramid. It's used by algorithms, but I believe it's also the way algorithms think of users. So when users searches, they want to get us from that data point all the way to wisdom as quickly as possible, which corresponds with what you just indicated right there. So it's going to be a very interesting couple of years ahead, I believe. Bryan.
And I think a lot of agencies are going to be in a lot of trouble in the next few years as more consumers realize where things are going, and that unfortunately the SEO agency model for most is just not an effective model. That's a whole different discussion.
Let's touch on it just a little bit more. Just delve into it just a bit more. Is it a case of brands are taking their marketing in-house, or SEO is just being widespread across different brands?
It's not only obviously the global brands, but a lot of this is the local side of this too. And local attention comes from local entities and local content creation and local events and stuff like that. And the typical agency just can't do that stuff for you, right? As a business owner, small business owner, you have to own that level of marketing, and the agencies are not going to be able to provide that for you. Now, if you're a global, 500, can you have local teams in around the globe? Sure. But just like news was always said, good news is always local because it's more relevant when it's localized. The same thing is with all content, all events. It needs to be localized. As we talked about earlier, right? The Google table, 5 times to the personalized local individual and to 1 time, right? To what's on the web. And so that has probably exploded. And so if we start thinking, how do we stay more relevant to the individuals and to the community and all that? That's very hard to scale from an agency point of view.
Bryan, thank you so much for your time today. Where's the best place for people to find you online?
I'm all over social media. It's very easy to connect with me. My main business now is dataturk.ai. That's the business I told you with the home services business, where we're doing data analysis for these companies as a service. And then I also have a home service agency with my wife here in Round Rock, Texas, and just trying to help the seniors and the people in our community, because community matters.
Indeed. Bryan, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating discussion. You've got me thinking about a number of things that I'm going to research even more, explore even deeper. So thank you so much.
Have fun chasing those rabbit holes.
Cheers, Bryan. Have a brilliant day.
Cheers.